There is an old motivational adage that goes, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." This saying is meant to stress the importance of hard work and to emphasize that success does not come without effort, regardless of one's natural talent. However, I think that this adage also poses an interesting and unaccounted for question: what happens when talent does work hard? In many cases, the outcome is often greatness, and the subject of this video, a climber by the name of David Lama, is the perfect example of this. But how does one define greatness in a sport like mountaineering, a sport that has, for a majority of its existence, forged its legacies largely in the shadows, its record book cemented by shared memories and sometimes a few photographs or short videos for proof? The likely reason that very little video footage and few photos exist for even many historic climbs is because mountaineering inherently isn't something that often makes for moment-to-moment riveting action for spectators, as the most impressive ascents are often weeks-long affairs with the exhausted climbers moving at a glacial pace upwards, slowly but steadily towards the summit. There have been a few people throughout mountaineering's storied history that have attempted to capture the true experience of mountaineering on film, such as several documentary films by the legendary Chris Bonington that documented some of his more notable ascents, but due to limitations and complications with the camera equipment available at the time, the extent to which he was able to document the experience was rather limited. However, born into the next generation of climbers, David Lama was poised to take the world by storm, as he managed to truly capture the experience of mountaineering in his videos, displaying his talents to an audience of millions of people as they watched, captivated, while he pushed the limits of what the human body is capable of and how far his determination and dedication to his craft could take him in such a demanding sport. And if you're dedicated to protecting your privacy online, look no further than the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. NordVPN helps keep your IP address and online fingerprint masked by routing your traffic through one of their 5,900 super-fast servers in 59 countries to choose from. If that's not enough privacy for you, well, NordVPN also has specialty servers as well, including double VPN servers and servers optimized for Onion addresses with their Onion over VPN services. If specialty servers aren't your specialty, that doesn't mean you can't benefit from using NordVPN as well. Other practical uses include circumnavigating region-locked content, which I often use while researching topics that don't have much Western coverage, but it can also be used to view different regional content on streaming platforms like Hulu and Netflix. You can also stream at ease, knowing that NordVPN also encrypts your data, so your internet provider won't be able to throttle your streaming speeds. With top-notch download and upload speeds and a bevy of great extra features, you really can't top NordVPN when it comes to virtual private networks. And now is a great time to try NordVPN out for yourself on up to 6 different devices. Go to nordvpn.com/morbidmidnight to get the 2-year plan with an exclusive deal plus 4 bonus months free. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/morbidmidnight to get the 2-year plan with an exclusive deal plus 4 bonus months free. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. David Lama was born on August 4th, 1990 in Innsbruck, Austria. His father was a mountain guide from Nepal, and his mother was an Innsbruck native. Naturally, David would begin climbing at an early age, and his natural talent was soon apparent as it caught the attention of Himalayan veteran Peter Habler at a climbing camp he attended at just 5 years old. Habler was so impressed by the young David that he called his parents following the camp and informed them that their son was unusually gifted, and soon after, David was recruited to the local competitive youth climbing team. As he grew older, his hard work and natural talent further propelled the development of his skills, and in 2004, at just 14 years old, he won the European Youth Cup. Later that same year, he would complete his first 514B rated route, a climb so difficult that a majority of recreational rock climbers would be unable to complete it, even potentially after decades spent climbing. The following year, in 2005, David would again win the European Youth Cup, and following this win, the International Federation for Sport Climbing would specifically change their entry rules to allow for David to compete in the senior division the following year in 2006 at just age 16. Despite being bumped up into a more competitive climbing division with older adult climbers, David would not slow in his winning ways, as he went on to become the European champion in lead climbing in 2006 and the world champion in bouldering in 2007, and was the winner of the overall World Cup ranking in 2008. He would follow this up by placing third overall the following year in 2009, but it was also in 2009 that Lama would attempt the first major mountaineering expedition of his career, a free climb of the notorious compressor route on Cerro Torre, a route aptly named for the gas-powered air compressor that still hangs from the mountain to this day as the only ledge on a vertical wall of rock and ice. The air compressor was originally hauled up the route in 1970 by an Italian expedition team led by Cesare Maestri, placing numerous bolts up the route to assist in their ascent, a topic which I covered much more extensively in my video about Cerro Torre, so if you'd like to know more about it, check out that video as well. However, David would be attempting to free climb it. Free climbing meaning without using any of the bolts or other equipment left behind by previous expeditions, only the natural rock and ice of the mountain. The mountaineering legend Reinhold Messner, who was the first man to successfully ascend all 14 8,000 meter peaks in the world, called the climb, quote, crazy and impossible. And in 2009, perhaps Messner would prove to be correct, as David was not able to complete the climb as he was repelled constantly by foul weather, and he, along with his filming crew that he had brought with him to document the climb, decided to abandon the attempt. Following this attempt, however, David would come under fire within the climbing community after he was criticized for the equipment that he and his team had left behind on the mountain that had to be removed by Argentinian climbers, including 30 more bolts that had been drilled by the film crew that added to the already bolt-laden compressor route, and 700 meters of rope that was also left behind. After receiving this backlash, David apologized to the climbers that had cleaned up the mess his team had left behind, and he swore to never do anything of the sort again, a promise to the community that he would most certainly keep. Following his failed attempt at Cerro Torre over the next year, David came to the realization that he would need to focus all of his efforts on either competition climbing or mountaineering. And in 2011, at age 21, he announced his retirement from competition climbing in order to focus all of his efforts into mountaineering. And it was also in January of 2011 that David would return to Cerro Torre for a second attempt at the ambitious climb. However, upon arriving, he and his climbing partner were met by an unusually icy headwall and a streak of bad weather that continually foiled their plans. However, on February 12th, David, along with his climbing partner Peter Ortner, utilized a short weather window and reached the summit. However, they did use some of the bolts along the route during their ascent, and had completed the climb primarily with the intent of raising morale, while also getting some advanced scouting in for their planned route for the free climb. The duo again returned the following summer in January of 2012 for another attempt at the climb. Interestingly, however, as they were making their final preparations for the climb, news reached them that a pair of climbers who had just ascended the compressor route had removed more than 120 bolts along the compressor route with the intent of restoring the natural climbing conditions of the mountain, in the process freeing the headwall completely of bolts. This would prove to be a boon to David, as he hadn't intended to use them during his climb anyways. However, this would complicate things for his filming crew, who were forced to climb to the summit from the easier western face, which, just as a reminder, means navigating Cerro Torre's gargantuan rime ice mushroom to reach the summit. Then from there, the film crews would then need to rappel down from the summit and down to the face of the compressor route just in order to film the attempt. However, the great efforts that the filming crew would go through to document this climb would not be for naught, as on January 19th, 2012, David Lama and Peter Ortner reached the summit in triumph, becoming the first people to free climb the extremely difficult compressor route on Cerro Torre, completing the climb in just 24 hours. Following this historic climb, David's reputation within the mountaineering community had been cemented as a top name in the sport, and his popularity only further skyrocketed after he won National Geographic's Adventurer of the Year award the following year in 2013. In 2015, David teamed up with mountaineering veteran Conrad Anker to concoct a plan to summit one of the tallest mountains in the world that had not yet been summited, the 6,895-meter Lunong Ri, which is located on the border of Nepal and China and nearby the oft-climbed 8,000-meter peak Cho Oyu, with their massifs being separated only by Nongpa La Pass between them. The duo began their attempt at the summit on November 12, 2015. They planned to ascend the mountain alpine style, as a quick ascent and descent were ideal for the steep mixed climbing conditions, as realistically, fixing camps ahead of time on such a route just wouldn't be feasible. On the evening of the 12th, the duo bivvied at the foot of the steep northwest pillar. The following day, they planned to make a push for the summit, but ran into complications as they ascended, such as a lack of ice on the mountain and high winds, and were just 300 meters below the summit when they were faced with a difficult decision to either face the winds and potential negative 40-degree overnight temperatures, or abandon the climb so close to the summit. Anker had a reputation for being a particularly risk-averse climber, an attitude and way of life he adapted after losing his close friend and mountaineering legend Alex Lowe in an avalanche on Shishapangma in 1999, an incident which I covered in another video a little while back. David and Conrad ultimately decided to abandon the climb, showing incredible self-restraint after coming so close to the summit. David and Conrad regrouped and returned to Lunong Ri the following year, and began another attempt on November 6, 2016. All had been going well on this second attempt, when at an altitude of approximately 6,000 meters, Conrad Anker began to suffer a heart attack. David assisted Anker in making a quick descent, where he called for a rescue helicopter, and 12 hours later, Conrad Anker underwent heart surgery in Kathmandu, leaving David without a climbing partner. Anker survived the surgery and would go on to make a full recovery, but following this near-death experience, Anker ultimately decided to retire from high-altitude mountaineering entirely. Despite the unfortunate circumstances, David decided that he'd attempt the climb alone, and set off for the summit again on November 8th, reaching the foot of the sheer face that evening, where he spent the night. The following day, David arduously ascended the face using rope solo techniques, which required him to set anchors for his ropes, climb and set another anchor, then descend and remove the previous anchor, just to repeat the process ad nauseum with a heavy, gear-filled backpack on his back as he did so. After almost an entire, exhausting day of this process, David conceded defeat and abandoned his summit bid. However, this would not mark the end of his saga with Lunong Ri, as on October 23, 2018, he returned to the peak for another solo attempt at the summit. Lama would spend 3 days on the mountain, battling against the bitter negative 30 degrees Celsius air temperatures, accentuated by strong winds that gusted at speeds of up to 47 knots. Despite the numerous hardships he endured over the course of those 3 days, at approximately 10 a.m. on October 26, 2016, David Lama became the first person to ever successfully summit Lunong Ri. Just a few months after completing this historic climb, David would again seek to put his talents to the test, joining fellow alpinists Hans-Jörg Auer and Jess Ross-Kelly, his teammates from the North Face sponsored climbing team in Canada in March of 2019, as they geared up to attempt the first ascent of the extremely difficult M16 route on House Peak, a sheer, intimidating 3,295 meter peak located in the Canadian Rockies in British Columbia. The trio set off for House Peak on April 15th and established a small base camp at the foot of the mountain at approximately 12:40 p.m. that day. Early in the morning of the following day, April 16th, the trio left base camp to begin their bid for the summit at 5:51 a.m., and by 7 a.m., they had already ascended 400 meters. From there, the climbers traversed away from the line they had been following to the rock band at the start of another unclimbed route, where at 8:36 a.m., David led a tricky pitch into a large, snow-filled gully. From here, the trio of climbers made rapid progress towards the summit after traversing the gully, and reached the summit at 12:40 p.m. By 1:37 p.m., they had descended back to the gully, and they were just below the upper mid-mixed climbing section they had just ascended, when suddenly, at approximately 2 p.m., a large cornice above the gully collapsed, which triggered a massive avalanche that swept up Lama, Roskilly, and Auer as it thundered down the face of the mountain. This avalanche hadn't gone unwitnessed, however, as another climber nearby saw it and snapped a photo of the avalanche and its aftermath, with snow still visibly streaming from the sheer mountainside in his photo. In the early morning hours of April 17th, Jess Roskilly's wife, Allison, had grown increasingly concerned about the trio and informed his parents that he had failed to check in at his scheduled time on his messaging service, and the following morning, they informed Parks Canada of the missing men. Parks Canada sent someone to investigate, and they found Jess's truck still in the parking lot. Following this discovery, a full search operation was mounted, and a helicopter surveying from above soon spotted the huge avalanche debris field at the base of the eastern wall. News of the renowned climber's disappearance spread very quickly, and Parks Canada really felt the pressure mounting, as on Friday the 19th of April, they received over 800 calls asking for updated information about the incident. However, by the evening of the 19th, the weather had worsened significantly, which caused the search efforts to be temporarily suspended until weather conditions improved enough to continue the search. After a tense weekend of waiting out the storms, search efforts resumed on the 21st of April, Easter Sunday, where, with the assistance of avalanche dogs, the search team was able to locate and extract the bodies of all 3 men from the avalanche debris field. Following his death, David Lama was honored in a massive memorial service with over 1,000 people in attendance that honored his incredible life and accomplishments. David was truly a generational talent, an intelligent, patient, and meticulous climber who managed to shatter people's expectations of what was humanly possible as he pushed himself to his limits. Unfortunately, much like his more aloof, equally talented, and also similarly aged counterpart Marc-Andre Leclerc, David Lama's incredible life was cut tragically short by the often arbitrary hazards of the mountains, a risk he was fully aware of. The description of his YouTube channel reads, quote, "Success, to me, doesn't primarily mean reaching the summit, but rather living up to my own expectations. That doesn't only depend on which projects I do or do not realize, but rather whether I do so in a style which I can express myself. Adhering to that idea is my priority, and I try to follow that in everyday life as well. What matters to me is that I can stand behind my decisions and actions. Obviously, a series of misfortunes can lead to a fatal end on any of my adventures. There is no point in denying that fact. It is my willingness to commit that demonstrates the total conviction of my actions, and that gives great personal value to my alpinism. Every mountaineer wants to leave something behind, and at the same time, he has the responsibility to respect what he inherits. First ascents are an eternal constant of alpinism." David's memory will always live on, as he was so generous as to capture his experience on film and upload them here on YouTube for everyone to enjoy in posterity, and I definitely recommend you check out his channel, which I will link in the description of course, if you haven't already, as the way he brings the experience of mountaineering to life through the screen is truly unparalleled. Thank you all for watching.